Welcome one and all to the Stock Up Podcast YouTube channel. My name is Alex. Today we're going to be going through and building a standard deck on MTG Arena. So let me tell you about my favorite card from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle set. It is Northwind Avatar. So 2 blue, red, 5/5 Dragon Spirit Avatar creature with flying. When this creature enters, if you cast it, you may put a card you own from outside the game into your hand. So, in my opinion, by far the coolest card in the set, and also potentially pretty strong. So, I'm going to be building around it. One of the things you could do with this card that's maybe a little more obvious is you could put it in like a Jeskai control deck. Maybe you can cut some of the Jeskai Revelations that deck normally plays and replace them with these. So, it's another win condition that way. It's, you know, a little bit cheaper than a 7-mana card, maybe on turn 6. You can play it, go get a 1-drop out of your sideboard and cast it, that sort of thing, or play it on turn 5 and get a sweeper to cast on turn 6. And that way you don't have to play all 4 Jeskai Revelations in your main deck. You can play some on the sideboard, for instance. So that's a potential use for it. However, I want to build a deck around it. I'm pretty interested to see if it's strong enough for standard. I think it maybe is. It maybe isn't also, you know, like it is 5 mana. You have to play it at sorcery speed. Some things I do like about it is, first of all, 5 mana, well, a 5/5 flyer, if you get it onto the battlefield, is pretty good in standard. People play a lot of burn and a lot of requiting hexes and a lot of seam rips. None of that touch it. They play bounce spells, which can be effective against this in some situations, but most of the time not, because you could just recast it and then get another wish. So, you know, the creature's strong. It's going to be pretty much as strong as creature on the battlefield. It's going to kill your opponent quickly. And then, of course, it's inherent card advantage, right? You get to wish. And wish is just you take a card out of your sideboard and put it in your hand. That's what this outside the game clause does. This can be very powerful, more so even than tutoring a card from your library, because you can put cards in your sideboard that you essentially wouldn't be able to put into your library, because you could play cards that are otherwise too expensive to reasonably main deck or too situational. But when you play the Northwind Avatar, if you're in that particular situation, you can go get that particular card and it'll be really powerful. So not only is it like, you know, cantrip flying creature 5/5 that draws a card, but ideally, if you build your cyber correctly, it draws the perfect card for the situation that you are in. So I do think it's a potentially strong card and a potentially strong win condition for a controlling type deck. That is where I'm interested in trying it first, mostly because of the blue mana cost. There's some other shells you can build with it. Like I did try it in a Jeskai deck that used Momo and Ashling to ramp this out. My problem with that deck was it felt a little bit clunky and bad if your opponent killed your Momo or your Ashling, which a lot of decks can do in standard, so I didn't love that. So for this deck, we're going to try 4 Northwind Avatar. We're going to build around it, and we're also going to be playing with Furdock Core. So this is a card that Jacob Negro turned me on to. Basically, one of the ways you can alleviate playing with a 5-mana card in your deck in standard is playing with some ramp. So Furdock Core curves nicely into it. You can play this on turn 3 and the Avatar on turn 4. But of course, Furdock Core also has other things going for it, some other synergies. For one, even though it ramps on turn 3, it is essentially an untapped ramp source. So you can play it, immediately play 1-drop, or, you know, you can play it on turn 4, immediately play a 2-drop, that sort of thing. It also has this ability where it can become a 4/4 late in the game, so that's pretty strong. It's like kind of like putting a creature land into play rather than just ramping a regular mana source into play. And then it adds 1 mana of any color. So Northwind Avatar, again, has the blue cost to it, so red could be the splash. Obviously, you could play a blue-red deck. For instance, one way I thought about playing this is you might want to play this in the blue-red Lessons deck. Right now, that deck has really cemented itself as like a 50% deck, but I do really think the Lessons package is strong, and I think what's going on with that deck is that people are really prepared for the Monument and Red Talent portion of that deck, so I think that deck actually should be interested in playing some different kind of win conditions. this is potentially something you could do in that deck. You know, you could play the normal lessons package, cheap removal, cheap interaction, and then win the game with this Northwind Avatar. But, you know, you don't have to do that. And of course, you could play this in like a blue-white, blue-black, or blue-green deck and splash the red, and Furdock Core helps with that. So gives you that color. And in addition to that, if you wanted to, I mean, this has any color, so you can put something in your sideboard that's off color from your main deck. And let's say you had some Furdock Cores, you had some starting towns, you had some multiversal passages. These are all ways that you could say, cast a Teamer card out of your sideboard if you're playing Jeskai, or cast a black card out of your sideboard if you're playing blue-white, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of ways that the mana can help too. And then, of course, this card's a shapeshifter. And so that's going to be a big key for the deck we're building today. It being a shapeshifter means that in play and in your hand, this is also a dragon. So that gives you 8 dragons. And this unlocks these dragon payoff cards that are in standard. So there's a number of good ones. There's Dispelling Exhale, as an example, which is a counter spell that gets better if you have dragons. Caustic Exhale gets cheaper if you have dragons, and so on and so forth. There's, you know, Whirling Dragonstorm, Dragonologist, all these things. And maybe we'll play some other dragons, like Marine Revergent is almost certainly going to be in this deck in some numbers, maybe a small number because we already have some expensive cards. But yeah, that's what the core does. And of course, it does a little bit more than that, right? Because even if you're not ramping right on turn 3, just having more mana in a game where you're casting 5-drops that draw more spells, not just cards, but actually is you're making sure you're drawing spells, just having a lot of mana in a game like that's pretty good. So this is going to be the base for our deck. Generally, once I have this going, the next thing I want to do is consider my mana base. This is a huge kind of core to my deck building, where I think it's really important that your mana base works well with the rest of your deck. It sounds like an obvious thing to state, but, you know, a lot of Magic decks that people win with, one of the reasons they have big problems, or they're just less consistent than some of the top decks, is because their mana is just like worse than other decks. If you look at right now in Standard, the decks that consistently do well are Izzet and like Mono Green at the moment. And Mono Green is obvious, you know, that mana's pretty good. Izzet is pretty good because Izzet has a nice Verge, it has a fast land, and it has a shock land. So the Izzet mana base is really nice. So I'm pretty interested in building a deck with a good mana base. And one of the lands I like in Standard are the Verges, especially with a deck that like this. The Verges, just in ideal scenarios, they come into play tapped. Well, first of all, they come into play untapped all the time. And in ideal scenarios, they're going to produce every color you want. So they're basically perfect. The downsides, of course, is the times where they're not online and you only have the one half. So it's really important to look at which half you have. And if we do that, then we're going to have an untapped land all game. It's a dual land that can, you know, play our 1-drops on turn 1 and our 5-drops on turn 5. So that's perfect. One of the things I like looking out for in this format is, when building a blue deck, is which Verges have blue first. So that's going to be Gloomlink Verge and Willow Rush Verge. This is because I really like playing with Spell Snare. So Spell Snare is easily one of the best blue cards in Standard, I would say. It's very powerful to be able to always spend less mana to stop a spell from your opponent, so it's very efficient. You know, almost everybody has to play 2-mana cards in Standard to have their deck be good. And it also lets you kind of keep tempo early, which is a big problem for control decks. Typically, they fall behind early, and Spell Snare is a way to keep that tempo, make sure you don't fall behind, win big counter wars late. Excellent card. But one of the big benefits of this card is when you're going second and you can leave it up on turn 1. So the Verges that have blue first are nice for that. So Willow Rush Verge or Gloomlink Verge. In this particular deck, I don't really see a need for green. Like, there's not too many green cards in Standard in general that would have a role in this style of deck. Like, it doesn't really provide much interaction we want. Maybe sideboard interaction would be okay. It provides ramp, but we already have that in the Fur core. So I'm gonna build this deck with Gloomlake Verge. So we're gonna be a blue-black deck, Grixis deck, something like that. We could just splash black. We could be blue-red. We'll have to think about it. So Gloomlake Verge is gonna be good, and then we're gonna need red sources for our Northwind Avatar. One other thing I'm interested in trying is Cavern of Souls. Another reason or another way that playing a card like this can be bad is if your opponent, leaves up 2 mana and you're stuck playing a 5-drop at sorcery speed and your opponent counters it. So some number of Cavern of Souls are going to be in the deck for sure. Depending, if we're going to be playing Gloomlake Verge and Cavern and Northwind Avatar, we're looking at 3 colors. The Cavern can splash the Avatar, because we can put it on Dragon and it can pay for the red spell, but it can't cast any other spells on our deck, so we're not, we're unlikely to have the luxury of playing too many of those, but I think we could play a few. The next way, Steam Vents, the shock lands are pretty much the most powerful lands in Standard because their downside is that you pay 2 life some of the time, which is generally a lower cost than having your Verge not working. So, but of course every deck gets Shockland, so that this doesn't determine which decks you play exactly, but it does play a key role in your mana base. So we're gonna have some number of Steam Vents with Northwind Avatar for sure. If we're looking at a Grixis deck, probably some number of Blood Crypt as well, rent, just to get our red mana. Another big thing in control decks in the moment in Standard is Demolition Field. So people play a lot of creature lands. They play Cavern of Souls, they play Bossing Say, just a ton of problematic lands. Some decks even skimp on basics too, so you can kind of get them with Demolition Field. But this is pretty important, and what this can do is if we're only doing a light red splash, so we mostly only need blue and black and we don't need red until turn 5, we can use Demolition Field with a mountain. And in this way, we can fix, we can sort of count Demolition Field as a source to go get Northwind Avatar. So we can decide if we don't have red mana and we want to play Avatar on 5, then on just turn 3 or 4, maybe we can find a spot to Demolition Field something, go get a mountain, and that'll be partially some of our fixing. So even just right here, we've got 2, 4, 6, 7, and plus 3 soft sources, so 10 and 14 sources here, looks like, for our Avatar, if you count the Furduck core. So that's pretty good. I would say the minimum amount of sources you would want for a single pipped red card, something like 13. Honestly, for a card that's really expensive like this, you could get away with less than that. I'm sure it wouldn't be crazy to play as low as 10 red sources, especially if card drawing, ways to delay the game, that sort of thing. But I do want to be able to cast it on time, and so I'm going to have enough, and I might want some red cards in the deck. So, and Furduck core might get countered, destroyed, that sort of thing. So I'm relatively happy having this many red sources. We'll have to think about it as we build the deck more. We're definitely going to play 4 Gloomlake Verge. If this is going to be a blue-black deck, we're definitely going to have Watery Grave, right? And from there, we're going to need some islands and some swamps to go get with our Demolition Fields. Not sure how many. And actually, I'm being honest, we're gonna have to change these basics a little bit. We don't want these ones. Let's see, get some good basic for a dragon deck. We'll go with these Japanese ones. These are nice. Swamp, island. This one's got a dragon on it. We'll go with that one. Mountain. Let's see. Going for a Japanese style with a dragon. There we go. Okay, these are good. They're not complete matches, but they're good. They match in spirit. It's important. So, how many lands is this total? 27. Generally with control decks, only need 1 mountain. So it's actually 24 land. Okay. So generally with these decks, control decks, you want between 26 and 27 in standard, especially when you're playing these more expensive spells that are 5 or 6 mana. Furdak Core could impact that a little bit, like maybe you can get away with a couple less. The thing is, you don't really want to have to be playing Furdak Core like as your land drop. You want it has a ramp spell, so you want to make sure you hit a land every turn, probably up to 6 mana, and still be able to ramp with the core. So you need a ton of land. You need utility lands. So, well, if you have utility lands, you can kind of get away with more lands. We only have Demolition Field as your utility land, so it's not a ton of utility. The other thing that matters is, like, if you're mana screwed, do you have some card drawing on turn 2 and 3 to cast? I mean, this deck's certainly going to have Stock Up, right? Just one of the best blue cards. And a lot of control decks play Stock Up. And one of the reasons is on turn 3, if you're missing lands, you know, you can play Stock Up and go search for lands. Same with Consult. You know, it's not great to have to play Consult the Star Charts on turn 2 to search for a land, but you could certainly do it. And all this means you could probably get away with 26 land, I would say, the core and all that. So we've got 24 here. We could count our sources exactly. We've got 4, 8, 11, 12, 13. You can kind of count this 16 blue. It's not really enough. So this is also 16 black. And as your core colors, when you have this many land, you kind of want more like 18. So, I mean, we need 2 more lands. We probably need to play a couple more dual lands in blue and black. So our options are going to be like Restless Reef, which can act as a win condition and is pretty nice against the Demons deck. Because if they play their Demon, you could just attack them with Restless Reef and that pretty much wins a game. It's also, in real games of Magic, if you just have a creature land in play, sometimes it changes how games work. Like you can swing twice to change the clock with Northwind Avatar, or maybe your opponent can't play it in certain ways with their planeswalkers because you have them. So I'm decently interested in having some number of reefs. Do like Undercity Sewers also. I mean, it just plays so well with the Verges, because it means like if you have a Restless Reef and a Verge, you can't get double black, but if you have Undercity Sewers and a Verge, you can. That being said, we have Steam Vents, Blood Crypt, and all these basics. So we don't need Undercity Sewers too much. How many basics do we need? So let's say if we wanted to use all 3 Demolition Fields, we probably want, you know, and we draw some basics naturally, we probably want like at least 5 basics in our deck, but we probably don't need 7. And we could do something like that. Play 2 reefs. This would give us 4, 8, 11, 13, 14, 15, kind of like 17. So this is like, I'm more comfortable with this. It's 25 land. Even do it this way. 8, 10, 12, 4, 6, 8, plus 8, 16. So this is like 16 hard sources and then like 7 soft sources for blue and black. So that's pretty good. And in fact, you probably could go down to like 15. Like maybe we cut Undercity Sewers and we play 1 more like Cavern of Souls. Cavern of Souls is pretty strong. You can cast Armor Ring, River Regent. Although, you know what? Probably want to play a Fountain Port, to be honest, since it's just such a strong land. I am going to want to have a land in my sideboard because of Northwind Avatar. So it's actually possible I just have the Fountain Port in the sideboard. Because I could easily see a situation, let's say you only have like 4 lands in your hand, and maybe you drew a core, and you ramped out the dragon, but you don't have another land in your hand, you only have 4 on play, you would definitely be pretty interested in getting a land in that situation. And if you've already cast your Izzet dragon and you have like a core or something, you probably don't need a colored land, so you might as well get a utility land. Fountain Tort's probably the best one. So, yeah. I think something like this. Oh, this is 27 land. Yeah, I think something like this would be good. And then we will revisit the mana base again once we build the rest of the deck. But this will show us what we're capable of. So we don't put spells in our deck we can't cast. Like, for instance, when I'm looking through the spells, I can't really put like Abrades or something in my deck because I don't have the red sources early. But I can put Spell Snares in my deck. I can put Requiting Hex in my deck. And, you know, this is the next thing I want to work on for my deck, is having lots of cheap interaction. Because if you look on turn 3, I'm ramping or casting card draw. And like on turn 5, I'm playing this kind of slow dragon. So I really want to make sure the board is pretty clear for the first couple of turns. So I'm pretty interested in like maxing out on my cheap interaction. I actually don't necessarily need for Requiting Hex because I have access to the Exhale, Black Exhale. This ability, or this ability, -3/-3, I would say is a slightly better removal spell than Requiting Hex, destroying a creature with mana value 2 or less, but it's not always going to cost 1. But right now I do have 9 dragons. Maybe I could play 2 and 2. Wouldn't be too bad. The other like good removal spells in these colors are going to be Shoot the Sheriff. Could play some of those. Actually, I don't love this card. I find that, first of all, 2 mana for a removal spell is good, but not, you know, you don't want to fill your deck with too many of them. And second of all, it does miss. Like, it misses on some pretty important creatures. It misses, for instance, on Slick Shot Show Off and like a lot of the cards from the mono red deck. And those matchups, you really need your cheap removal to be good, you know? So this is on Changeling creatures. It's okay, but I don't want to play a ton of them. Maybe just one. I also really like Bitter Triumph. And I wish I could play more than like 1 or 2, but I'll probably just play 1. The cost is pretty high, but the flexibility of being able to kill a Planeswalker is pretty high also. This could easily be a card that'd be good in the sideboard too, to go get with Northwind Avatar, so we'll consider that. In terms of exhales, Dispelling Exile is really nice. The best 2-mana counterspell in Standard is probably No More Lies, right? But that's Azorius, we don't have access to it. Dispelling Exhale only counters for 2 when you don't have a dragon, but it does counter for 4 when you do, and that's more than No More Lies, and we have 9 dragons at the moment, so I think this is going to be a pretty strong card. We could play other counter spells. You know, Negate's a really strong card. Essence Scatter's pretty strong. I'm a little hesitant to put these in my deck, even though I do want some hard counters that'll work even if my opponent has, you know, like 10 lands in play. Because a lot of the reasons you play these in your main deck is because you need something to catch in the late game. But honestly, if you have Northwind Avatars, you could always like tutor for a late game counter spell out of your sideboard. And it's also the case that like people play a lot of non-creature spells that are pretty important to hit right now. There's like the enchantments, the talents, Monument of Endurance is a big one. The Earthbender's Ascension is a big one. So I don't love having like a situational as in Scatter in my deck. Same with Negate. And I think particularly since you have Northwind Avatar and you can go get answers to these weird permanents, you're not quite as reliant on counterspells. So I might actually play less counterspells. Maybe I'll still play 1 3-mana one. My options there are like 3 steps ahead. This is what everyone plays at the 3-mana spot. I actually don't love this card. It might be okay here. You can create a copy of like Furlock Core. And you have some extra mana lying around. So maybe this would actually be the deck for 3 steps ahead as your counter. I will say normally though that like I find that when you play with this card 80% or more of the time you just play the cancel mode, in which case I've just started playing this card in my deck with Refute. Because if you're going to be casting the cancel mode, a lot of the time having a loot is like actually pretty powerful, especially when you have some situational cards in your hand to discard. You have a lot of land in your deck. Sometimes you're going to discard some lands. The loot's just really nice. Even late in the game, you know, you might think, oh, I'm really missing out, but you're still getting a loot. You don't get draw 2 and then a loot. Still pretty good. So honestly, I might still just play Refute. I sort of just think it's a better card than 3 steps ahead. One thing that got me to play Refute, especially, was playing these blue-black decks, because another card you need in a deck like this is you need a sweeper. We could play some smaller sweepers. Like, we could play Fire Magic. That would be pretty good, I think. Might be a little awkward to play main again. We don't have much red, right? So this is kind of like a late-game sweeper. So maybe this just belongs in the sideboard. But it would be a good sideboard card to get with Northwind Avatar. We could play Scavenger Regent is kind of a nice one because it's a decent sweeper that doesn't kill your dragons if you have it in play, and that can be a dragon to kill your opponent, and then also it's good with your exhales. But really, you know, you're gonna need a sweeper in these colors that kills big creatures. Usually the go-to for that is like explosive, what's it called? Ill-timed explosion. But we don't, you know, this is get to a maximum of 5, and honestly our curve's pretty low, so that's not going to really kill big things. We're just going to need to play Deadly Cover-Up. I don't love it because it's 5 mana, and we already have 4 Northwind avatars, but we do have the core to ramp into it, so that's probably just the one we're going to play. It is a strong card. The Collect Evidence ability is really powerful. It's the sort of thing where this ability on its own, you know, when it's on its own card isn't very good, but when it's attached to a sweeper is pretty good. You can kill, like, if you Wrath an enduring creature, you can exile that so it doesn't come back. You can exile flashback cards that are in their graveyard, or you can just, you know, some of the time you will go after their win conditions. Say that's less common, but sometimes, you know, you don't have anything else to do and you have plenty of evidence to collect, so you just go ahead and do that, make sure they don't draw like the perfect card or whatever. And that can matter, so gonna play some of those for sure. Maybe one in the sideboard. I like the idea of playing a Scavenger Regent, although perhaps that's a luxury. The one thing that's nice about it is sometimes you can get away with wrathing your opponent's board for like 4 or even 3 mana, so killing either X1s or X2s, in which case it's better than Cover Up. So could be good to play a mix. And as you can see, kind of already over 60 cards. So we're pretty much locked into this main deck. I'm pretty happy with this. We've got to cut 3 cards. I like my one-ofs in Regent and Meringue. Meringue is a card that actually plays pretty nicely as a one-of. A lot of lists in Standard, if you ever see, they'll have like one Meringue, and it might see like a silly Miser card, but I actually think it makes a lot of sense as a one-of. So basically, it gives you another card advantage source, which can be nice. Gives you something outside of just 4 Consultant, 4 Stock. It gives you kind of like a 9th one. And not only that, but when you cast this piece of card drawing, it actually goes back in your deck. So the dragon is always just sort of lurking. And when you have access to a lot of your deck in a long game, it's nice to be able to find this like big creature and big board affecting spell and catch all sort of spell where you can bounce any sort of permanent, maybe counter on the way back down, that sort of thing. It can be clunky if you have a lot of them, but honestly, like, it's a super strong card. If either Stock Up or Consult the Star Charts didn't exist in Standard, which we're blessed to have so much good card drawing in this, you know, we have like a decade's worth of good card drawing in this one Standard format. But if we didn't have either one of these, I think Meringue or Regent would see probably 4 of play. But, you know, Consult and Stock Up are both slightly more efficient as card drawing, so it makes sense to play those and then a small number of Meringues, I think. So I'm happy with that. Pretty happy with playing 4 Exhale. Do have to cut some things. You know, I think I might cut these 3 mana counters. I don't love 3 mana counters in a Standard. I mean, people just play with as many cheap cards as they can. I mean, that's what we're trying to do. And so paying 3 mana to counter something that costs 1 or 2 mana isn't great. We also already have 8 3-drops we're trying to tap out for in turn 3. And one of the big benefits of these 3 mana counters is they're sort of a necessary evil where you can't always have the right mix of spells in your main deck as a control player to beat everything your opponent presents. So having some catch-all counter spells into the late game is nice. But honestly, with Northwind Avatar, we sort of can have access to everything. Like, we can put something that kills an enchantment and an artifact and a planeswalker and what have you in our sideboard. So I'm not going to play these. And then we got to cut one more card. Maybe it's one of these card drawing spells, or one of the dragons, or one of the Furdock cores. It's probably the best. Let's see. So we've got essentially 8, 9 card drawing spells, but also Northwind Avatar is kind of card draw because it can tutor a card drawing spell. So I might cut either a either a stock up or a consult. I don't think that'd be too crazy. This is with 26 land, yeah. Yeah, I think that'd be somewhat reasonable. Probably cut a consult. The other thing is, like, maybe in this particular metagame, you don't want 4 Spell Snare because it's not very good against mono green. They just have, like, Badger Bull Cub and Bristly Bill, mainly. It's decent against Prowess. Honestly, 1 Spell Snare could probably live in the sideboard, and we could play another removal spell because we don't have a ton. Maybe another Requiting Hex. Yeah, I'd say this is a good start, you know, like, until I play some games, I'm never going to know for sure the way to build the deck, because you have to see, like, where your weak points are and whatnot, but this is a good start. I'm happy with this. We've got some one-ups to try, you know, and we're trying 4 core and 4 Northwind. I could easily see, for instance, that you're supposed to play 3 of Fur Core and or 3 of Northwind Avatar. But yeah, I want to try this. I did end up going with 3 Camera Souls. I think that's too much, actually. Let's cut one of those. Probably another duel. Yeah. Okay, let's focus on the sideboard now. Because obviously that's a huge part, or a huge portion of your deck when you're playing with a Wish sideboard. I mean, just in general, obviously, but with a Wish sideboard, I think what I'm going to want to do, especially with 4 Worthman Avatars, I'm going to play with like 15 different cards. And yeah, we'll see how that goes. So these all look pretty good. One of the things, the couple of categories of cards I want to have access to is I want a mana source. We've got Fountain Port, and actually Jacob also recommended this, Mox Jasper. Obviously, Moxes are really powerful, and if you play it when you have a dragon, Fur Core or Northern Avatar, then it's going to be online. So maybe we don't need to play both Mox Jasper and a land, since they're both essentially a mana source. And I do want to try the Mox Jasper. Some things it could do is it could just act as a land that adds any color. You could get it on turn 5. Like if you play Northwind Avatar on turn 5 and you have a Spell Snare or something, you can go get the Jasper and leave up your Spell Snare. You can get it on turn 6 when you play Northwind Avatar and leave up Dispelling Exile. So I definitely want to try that. I think what I'll do is I think I'll move the Fountain Port to the main deck. And we'll have the Mox Jasper on the sideboard. 4 colors lands, kind of 6, you know, although this casts our Northwind Avatar. It's a little sketchy, but our mana, like, we cut the refutes and stuff, so we only have mostly single blue and single black stuff, so it might be okay. And we've got the Fur Cores to help fix us. So I'm willing to try it at least, for sure. Spell Snare. Yeah, so as I was saying, the categories of cards that you want is you want a mana source. That's what I think of. I think of cheap spells. So you can like play the Avatar, go get something cheap so you can catch up on the next turn, or play it on turn 6 and then play something cheap. So examples of this would be Into the Floodmaw is a card I'm considering. Nice, cheap, versatile card. It bounce a Planeswalker or any type of permanent, really. The red card I'm thinking of is the Blight spell, Cinder Strike. So 1 mana for 2 damage of sorcery speed, but if you blight onto a creature, which you're going to have this 5/5 when you play it, you could blight onto the 5/5 and it's still going to be a 4/4. And you can deal 4 damage to like an Orboid or something, so that's pretty tempting. Like the 4th Requiting Hex, you know, could be good. You could, if you really needed life gain, again, you could blight and get you can blight on your dragon, get a couple points of life. A Null, really good cheap card. Bitter Triumph, it's decently cheap. Fire Magic's pretty nice. And then the other category of card is going to be expensive Haymakers. So when I'm looking on Arena for this sort of thing, I'll literally just do this. I'll go and I'll look, like, let's say in this particular situation, I'm looking for expensive Haymakers. Realistically, it's going to be a rare, mythic rare, let's be real, 2026. And you can look at just all these expensive cards, 5, 6, 7 plus, select our colors. Although really it could be partially off color, so we won't even do that. We'll just look at every color and have a look-see. So in white, most of these cards cost double white, right? So that's not really feasible in our deck. so nothing comes out in white. Quantum Riddler could easily be a good card to get. Duanagi could easily be a good card to get. Season of Weaving. This one's really nice. It works particularly well with Northwind Avatar. So obviously if you play Avatar on 5, then on the next turn you'll be able to cast this. And you get to choose 5 pause worth of modes, so it could be just a draw 5. So that's a nice grindy card. Or it could be a sweeper, where you're bouncing each non-land token permanent, and also, like, since you have this dragon in play, you could create a token of the dragon and then bounce everything except that token. Unfortunately, the token doesn't actually trigger the wish again because you won't have cast it. But you'll get the original Northwind Avatar back in your hand, which you can then cast it and wish again. So I'm almost certainly going to play Season of Weaving. That sounds pretty nice. You could play Meringue in the sideboard. That would be decent. This would be good if it didn't bounce your dragon, but fortunately it does. Black. Liliana's a decently powerful sideboard card. Massacre Worm. Don't love that it costs triple black. Could be powerful, though. That one might be a little too situational, because in games where you would want to get something that killed small creatures, you don't really need a creature that's also, like, nugget them from 2 life, even though that would be good. You probably win with just a regular sweeper, so you probably don't need Massacre Worm. Summon Primal Odin is pretty strong, although I have an idea for a card that's better that we'll get to in a moment. Cloning of Shredder would be nice if the Northwind Avatar could be reanimated and still get its wish effect, but it can't. The Rise of Sozin. This is probably the sweeper I would play over Deadly Cover-Up if I was going to play a sweeper, because you'll probably be able to play this 106 after you play Avatar, and it's pretty powerful. So I'm kind of interested in that. Unholy Annex. Funny enough, this one's like not a super expensive card, but it is a card that fits well in this deck because it's like a grindy card you can search up, and you can actually have the demon in play pretty easily if you just have a single 4-core, which is pretty nice. So I'm actually pretty attracted to that card. It's just so good with 4-core. Red, not a ton here that's appealing. Green, yeah, everything's just big creatures. Multicolor, I mean, if this wasn't 8 mana, 8's just so much. If this was like 7 mana, probably be pretty reasonable to consider, since a lot of decks can't beat it once it's in play, but 8 is just so much. None of these look really appealing. Bonnie Paul would be okay, right? If you have the core, you could play it, but, you know, once we built our mana base, I don't really want to play with Starting Town. I could, but that would be basically the cost of playing something like this, and I don't think it's worth it for Bonnie Paul. Even for Jeskai Revelation, like if I played some Starting Towns, I could probably play this. But we have other good options. Death Begets Life also would be decent. Again, 8 mana. I mean, this effect's really good. I don't think it's for this deck, though. It destroys enchantments. It leaves the core around. That's tough. That would be good. I think what I'm going to do is mostly rely on Ugin as my top end. Ugin's just like easily one of the best cards in the standard. It's very expensive, that's why it doesn't see play, but if you can just tutor one of them in some games where you're going to be able to get to 7 mana, I think it's going to be excellent. Just kind of creates this situation where you play Ugin, you kill their most important thing, and then they like can't kill Ugin because it has so much loyalty, and they can't kill you because you're gaining 3 life and drawing a card every turn, so you don't even really need to use the other abilities. Although with 4 cores in your deck, you can trigger the first mode again and exile a permanent, which is pretty nice. So definitely going to put an Ugin in the sideboard, and that's probably good for the expensive stuff. This does bring us to 15 cards, but I do want some other cards in my deck. Like I want a hard counter, so I think I probably want like 3 steps ahead. That way, you know, if I'm in a late game situation that's going really well, I can play Northwind Avatar and go get a hard counter that counters anything and lock up the game. I probably want cheaper options as well, though. Like, it'd probably be nice to have a Negate and an Essence Scatter in my sideboard. That way, if I'm worried about a non-creature spell, I can go get a Negate. If I'm worried about a creature, I can get an Essence Scatter. Although, to be honest, when you're that late in the game, Essence Scatter is like I mean, you're not really going to be afraid of cheap creatures, so probably can just play Disdainful Stroke. Probably covers more bases. We've gotten a null. It'd be nice to have some cards that killed on-board enchantments or artifacts. I guess you could use Ugin to kill enchantments, and there's great enchant removal in blue and black anyways. There is one card. What is it? Destroy enchantments. There's Feed the Swarm, obviously. There's Withering Torment. This card's okay. It's 3 mana, though, and you lose 2 life. It's pretty rough. Okay, I won't lie. It's pretty rough. Yeah, I think for enchantments, I'm just going to rely on Anno and Ugin to deal with them. That seems fine. But I would like a way to kill an artifact, because Ugin actually can't kill an artifact if it's colorless, which most of them are. So I probably want like an Abrade. Although honestly, could probably play Suplex. Yeah. So the reason you play Abrade over a card like Suplex when you're choosing to put one in a regular deck is that when you have to play it normally, like you have to put it in your deck and draw it, and you draw it in a situation where you don't need to just immediately kill an artifact. You actually want the more flexible card that's an instant, so you can like instant speed kill a creature. But I think in this deck, we're only really going to be getting this when we need to kill an artifact, and being at instant speed was likely not to matter because they'll probably already have the artifact in play. I'd rather have this because it also is versatile in the way that it can exile a creature. So like Enduring Curiosity, Enduring Innocence, any creature that needs to be exiled to kill. You know, there's the 3-mana 2/3 black guy that when he hits you, you lose half your life. Those sorts of cards, you can get this and have a way to exile. For that reason, it'd be nice to have a graveyard hate card, right? So probably want a Lantern. You could also have Ghost Vacuum, but Soul Guide and Lantern is better when your opponent's graveyard is already full. And since we're going to be tutoring this and not having it in our hand on turn 1, it's probably better to have a Lantern. We could also play another graveyard card, Strategic Betrayal. This is very good against, say, the Is It Spellmental's deck. Kills their big creature and exiles their graveyard. It's nice to have an Edict in your sideboard, right? When people are playing with Leatherhead now, as hexproof. And there's some, occasionally your opponent will present an indestructible creature or something crazy like that. You can get it with this. So that's kind of nice. Yeah, so that's mostly what I would want. I mean, we're already at 21. There's other things I could think of that I could want. Like, for instance, I thought of this card, Wild Ride. So obviously, like, if on turn 6 you play your dragon and you have another red lying around, you could go get this and nug your opponent for 8 if they're at 8. Or you could attack their planeswalker or something. So that, I would definitely play this if I had more slots. I think the fact that it's both a little situational and I'm not always going to have access to double red, right? With how my mana base is constructed, I'm often just going to have 1 red when I play Northwind Avatar that I don't think the Wild Ride's going to be worth it. So I think what we'll do is just try to narrow down what we have. So 21 cards. Let's see, what's redundant? Unagi. I don't think we need Unagi. It's a little too narrow. Quantum Riddler, Meringue. We have Season of Weaving and Ugin as like big card and Unholy Annex. We probably don't need those. Rise of Sozen. I do like this. Maybe we keep it. I guess both of these kind of act as like our 6-mana sweeper. We probably don't need both. And I think I like the Season of Weaving better. Like, it also bounces non-land permanents, which is pretty nice. If you're already paying 6 mana, it has nice synergy with the Northwind Avatar. Rise of Sozen gets annulled, which in a sideboard game, your opponent might board in annul since you have the core. And if you were to tutor that, that would be brutal. They probably don't have that, but I mean, maybe. All right, we're going to cut that for now because we need room. I'm going to cut Bitter Triumph. If I need to kill Planeswalker, I can get Ugin or maybe even Into the Floodmaw. Into the Floodmaw, by the way, could be bounce off because you could play on turn 6 Northwind Avatar and hold up bounce off to like protect it from a removal spell. That'd be okay. But I think in those situations, you'd probably just get like a way to turn and get a negate against a deck like that. So we just have to cut one more. You know, I thought of a couple cards, other kind of cards we want. It'd be nice to have a life gain spell. I guess we have Ugin and Annex. but like Luis Pompous Pillager comes to mind. Obviously not a card you play in your main deck, but like, you know, in some situations, really late game, you have a ton of mana, you're up against an aggressive deck, you just play a giant life leaker that drains your opponent and really shuts the door. That sounds pretty impressive. It might overlap too much with Ugin, although you could play it a lot sooner. You could play Ugin, you know, you play it on turn 5 or 6 after ramping and getting a Northwind Avatar in play. So that's pretty appealing. The other thing I thought about was Deceit. So Deceit has a couple things going for it. First of all, again, like you can play Northwind Avatar on turn 5, and then if on turn 6 Deceit would be a good play, you could get it and just do like the full Vindicate mode, kill a problematic permanent, sort of like how Ugin does. But also I could totally see a situation where on turn 7 against certain decks, you play it and then grab this and duress your opponent. So I think I'm interested in playing that. It's also, it's more flexible. So when I go to Cyborg games, if I have something that's terrible in my main deck against my opponent, I could actually board in Deceit as a pretty flexible card. And in fact, I maybe want to think about that more. Like I maybe want more of these cards to be somewhat reasonable and flexible in the way that I could board out. Like let's say I play against no control deck, I really need to get some of these removal spells on my deck in that situation. In which case I, you know, can board into some of these cards. I think Spell Snare, Hex. Yeah, I think for that reason, actually, I'm going to make my deck a little more flexible, and I'm just going to put the Spell Snare back in the main deck. Cut like this Caustic Exhale. So I still have 8 cheap things, but, you know, Spell Snare is better in more matchups than a Requiting Hex would be. I think for the same reason that I'm not including the Wild Ride, where like the double red's a little tough, I think I'm going to cut Cinder Strike. Fire Magic is still pretty nice because some of the time you can, again, if you have double red, you play it on turn 6, Northwind Avatar, get a Fire Magic, sweep some 1 toughness things. But also you can just get it and do like the 6-mana mode to sweep on the following turn. So that's pretty nice. Again, a card I could see boarding in against some matchups. Cut one more card. I think I'll cut the 3 steps ahead. I think between Negate and Disdainful Stroke, that should have my bases covered. So yeah, I think I'll go with this. This is by no means like a perfect sideboard. I'm going to have to play with the deck, and I'm sure I'll change some things. I'm not super sure about the Luis Pompous Pillager, but I'm pretty interested in trying it. Seems like it could potentially be really good. It's exactly the kind of card I want, where it's super situational, but could be amazing in some spots. So, yeah. Okay. Well, that's going to be the build of the deck. Thanks, everyone, for watching. I hope you gleaned some insight from this. This is going to be a fun one to play for .core and Northwind Avatar. I'm going to record a video of me playing some game on the ladder. And at the end of that video, I'll either conclude that this deck's not very good and you shouldn't play it, or I'll conclude it's great, or I'll conclude that I'll need to make some changes and evaluate it then. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Welcome, one and all, to the Stock Up Podcast, your one-stop shop for stocking up on the information you need to qualify for the Pro Tour. My name is Alex Midas. I am joined each and every week by my co-host, Jacob Negro, where we talk about everything related to competitive Magic and how you can qualify for the Pro Tour. If you'd like to support us, the best way to do so is over on patreon.com/stockuppodcast. At the moment, we have one tier that's $1 a month, and for that, you get access to all of our exclusive content. For all of our patrons who have supported us thus far, on behalf of Jacob and I would like to thank you very much. And if you'd like to follow us also over on YouTube, that would be much appreciated. Of course, you can also listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. So thanks for listening, and please enjoy the rest of the podcast.